Social scientists have long argued that newspapers are biased against women. But this is true. To find out, my co-authors and I analyzed a very large newspaper database containing billions of references to female and male individuals. What did we find is that even in the 21st century, only 17% of those references refer to women. Now you could say evidence for clear bias. What we found actually is that pretty much all of that difference can be attributed to women not occupying top positions in the various fields that they're famous for. So because there is a glass ceiling in the real world, like a certain level in an organization above which women will never rise, and they will never make it to those top positions, or very few. That's why in the newspapers, where the cameras are all on those top positions, we see very few women appear in the newspaper. So what is happening in the newspaper is purely a reflection of the inequality that exists in the real world. And so it's a paper ceiling, as we call it. In a different study, we compared the demand side with the supply side. We wanted to see if the public was maybe interested in men, and that's therefore also why the newspapers keep talking about men. So what did we do? We went to Wikipedia and identified categories of people, such as senators or Olympians, athletes, where you have both men and women. And then so we would have an apple-to-apple comparison between a man and a woman in the same category. And then we looked at whether people would visit the Wikipedia pages of these individuals, right? So the Wikipedia page that says Arnout van der Rijt, more often if this was a man than if it was a woman. And indeed, we found that it was the female Wikipedia pages that were more commonly visited by the public. But then we looked at the newspapers, which of these scientists, the male or the female scientist, was more talked about in newspapers, and there we found the opposite. It was the male scientist who was more talked about in the newspaper than the female scientist. So there was a clear mismatch between supply and demand. So, public seems to want to hear about women, newspapers keep reporting about men. So in the final study, we wanted to know about not just the quantity of the coverage, but the quality of the coverage. Was it more positive or negative in the case of female subjects in newspapers than male subjects? So we have computer algorithms code the many millions of sentences that contain these women and men male names, and then look at the adverbs and the adjectives associated with these men and women to see if they were more negative or more positive. And what we found, surprisingly, is that counter to everything that we seem to think about women in the news compared to men, they were actually talked about much more positively. However, it turns out that the positive coverage that women get depends on how famous they are. Once they become really famous, they lose this advantage over men. It looks like women get punished more severely when they get famous.